Welcome back to Backstory Sessions, where we peel back the layers of the stories behind the stories. Today's guest is actor, director, and producer Louie James. Louis is a rising force in indie filmmaking, and his work spans psychological thrillers, action dramas, and character driven stories, which are my favorite. You've seen him in Help, River of Blood, and now the brand new time loop horror film, Manor of Darkness, and that is releasing on December the 9th. So, in this episode, we're going to dive right into the craft, the chaos, and we're going to find out what drives his work in front of and behind the camera. So, we're going to take a little trip across the pond today and welcome Louie James. We are so glad to have you as our guest, Louie.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much. It's wonderful that you set up these kind of podcasts so people from all across the globe can connect and share stories.
Yes, well, the US, we are very excited about the films that you're making, and indie films in particular, are very popular here. And it is great that we get to talk to you about it and get the backstory. We have a co host today, Willie, who is
Well,
also so glad to be here. Welcome, Willie. I wanted to say that. All right, let's jump
thank
into
you.
you're welcome. Let's jump into the backstory here, get a little bit of your background. So, you grew up where and how did you end up in acting?
Wow, you're taking me back now. So I grew up I was born in a town called Epsom, which is just outside of London in a borough of Surrey. So I'm very close to London in one regard, but also very close to the countryside. And I think for me, growing up, my dad was a great lover of all the American cinema, the golden age of American cinema way back. So I grew up with him watching all these movies. Now, as a young boy, I didn't really know who I was really watching, but looking back now, it was people like Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, and even before that, all these great actors, and moving through right to Marlon Brando, right through to all the more modern movies, I would call them, with Sly Stallone and people like that, right through to modern day. But for me, it was seeing all those old movies with my dad. Cary Grant, Gary Cooper, Mickey Rooney, all those guys in the old cinema. And to me, they were just these larger than life characters they existed somewhere, but I didn't know where, watching Clint Eastwood up on the screen and stuff. And my dad would often recite these one-liners to me, and I'd repeat them back, and they, out of context, they meant nothing to me at the time, but they kind of instilled this kind of magic in me, I think, that made me obsessed with cinema and these larger than life characters out there living these fantastical stories.
All right, so did you know then that there was something inside of you that wanted to emulate what they were doing?
Yes, I think there was. As kids, as you do, you run around, you play games with my two sisters, and you make up all kinds of fun and characters and stories. And, that always stayed with me, that sense of adventure and creating things. And life did take me on, many paths growing up in terms of the real world, growing up, going to school and then to study and trying to find your way. But in the back of my mind, there was always this yearning to do something bold, bigger than life, something creative, to get out there and live one of these stories that, that's the thing. Making movies is creating great stories is one thing, but you also want the adventure yourself as you're making them. And often podcasts like this, I love the name, Backstory, because it's all about the backstory. And sometimes it's larger than the movie itself in terms of what you go through and the adventures you embark on.
That is so true. I think people don't. I know I didn't really think about it until when I was writing. You learn these backstories, and there's such incredible things about the journey of it. And sometimes it is bigger than the product that you start out talking about. Has there been a role that changed you the most? Do you feel like?
Wow, that's a very good question. There have been many. Off the top of my head, I think probably. I mean, look, I've answered this from a different perspective. Coming out of it, I reflect and think, what kind of experience did I have there that taught me something, that helped me to grow as an individual? And I think the very first feature film that I did with Blake called Help, which Lucas A. Ferrara kindly supported us on, wonderful friend and producer. That was the first time I'd taken on a feature film as an actor. So in many ways, Blake and I were just, we'd finish the day and we'd be up, Blake and I, till the early hours of the morning, working out, what to do the next day and changing shots and scenes and working on the characters and changing dialogue. And then before you knew it, a couple of hours sleep and then the alarm clock was going off again. So that changed me. That film did change me in many ways, and it set me up to kind of approach filmmaking differently after that. It was the very first one for us. We never had any film school. Blake and I spent a lot of time making lots of short films for the very popular YouTube channel. We've got lots of genres on there. But that changed me as a person, I think, because it made me think, right, this is real. I can do this, and it requires a certain amount of kind of gusto. You got to go for it and make it through to the other side. That changed me in that kind of way. But then there have been characters too that have pushed me to the limits in different ways. I played AJ in River of Blood, which is out in the United States right now. That was set in the Thai jungle. So that required a lot of kind of focus because you're out there for real, in the jungle, and you're doing all kinds of stunts and you're sliding down mud and you're climbing trees, and you really have to be focused. And I think that was the first time I really got to be in an exotic location and play a character that kind of pushed me. And I think for those that haven't seen that film, if you haven't seen it, go check it out and you'll see what I mean. And I've posted a little bit of behind the scenes on my Instagram page that reveals some of the stuff that happened there. But yeah, so I hope that answered your questions in some way.
So were there any injuries or, so did you do all of these physical stunts, I'll call them for lack of a better word? It, it sounds like you enjoyed that. Is there something that like didn't go as planned?
Well, yes, there were a
Eh.
few incidents. But I wanted to approach it in the way that I like, Tom Cruise does. And I've been inspired by Tom Cruise, and he talks about how we should be competent, never kind of complacent or reckless. So you have to know what you're attempting, and there's always that thing, isn't there, where you want to do something groundbreaking, you want to push the boundaries in indie film, especially when you don't have massive stunt teams and big budgets and lots of time. So I think for me, there's a scene in that movie where you'll see me sliding down a mudslide. You'll see me jumping into a river from quite high up, and yeah, there's a few in there. But I did I did come back with a few minor scrapes, and I think in the moment, when the adrenaline's pumping, you just get on with it. And when I got back to England, I had this niggling pain in my shoulder and a few other bits and bobs. So I went to the doctor, and they were kind of, I think they thought I was a little crazy because they said, how did you do this? And I said, well, I was in the Thai jungle and I was hanging off a vine. I said, and they were looking at me like, is this guy crazy? But luckily enough, I came off unscathed, and since I've done a lot more crazy stuff. But you know, once again, it's one of those things where you have to take good care of yourself. You have to, risk assess things, but yeah, it's a tough one because I'm not sure if you have this process in any way in your life, but you're so passionate about something, and you just get a bit carried away sometimes, and you need good people around you to say like, hey, like maybe not, maybe slow down a bit. That
Well, at least you have it captured on video too.
exactly, yeah, forever and
So
ever.
so you could always be like, "Oh, look what I did." So let's talk a little bit about the work that you do. It seems that you blend like emotionally grounded performances, but you've got this storytelling going on and also a kind of darker psychological narrative. So, are you drawn to the darker side?
Hmm. Am I drawn to the darker side? I think we're all drawn to the darker side in some way, and you have to find a way I think justify it. It's very easy to tell very like prim and proper stories, and we've had a lot of that in the past. And I think what I like is approaching stories that, like you said, are deeper and darker, but in a way that brings some humanity, and there's the glimmer of goodness in these characters that are supposed to be evil or dark. But when you really get into their head, and that you find the circumstances they in just happen to be, through life or luck and chance, and you need to find a way to make those characters, shine through the screen so that the audience at home can resonate. And with the Manor, that was a challenge I had. You know, when you watch the character that I play, it looks like he's kind of, as it's written, and you could look at it like he's just after this one thing. He only cares about himself and about this. But I always think you have to have a subtlety in a performance where even around the dialogue, you can give glimmers of, certain looks on screen and moments, you know, usually at the beginning and the end of a scene where people can really see what you're thinking. And sometimes that, in a good actor, it can contrast, what they're saying and load the subtext even more. But look, I'd love to tell all kinds of stories. And it just seems that as indie filmmakers, it's quite a challenge to compete with a lot of the bigger budget studios. So it seems that, horror and psychological thriller, they're genres that the fan base are very loyal to, and they'll go and check out even without big names in the film. So I think that's why I've lent towards that kind of genre at this stage. Though, I'd love to do a big rom-com one day or something, a lot more,
I was
less,
gonna ask,
less dark.
yes. Well, it always could be in the future because you've had quite a diverse range already. And so I'm curious, the training, like, did you go to acting school? What prepared you for acting?
So I signed up to a place called the Actors Centre, which isn't there anymore, right in the heart of sort of Covent Garden in London, and it was great. I got to drop in. I met many different tutors, different teaching methods, and other like-minded people that were coming up, giving it a shot. And I was in my sort of early 20s then, and I met a really good teacher, Nathan Osgood, American guy, and he was teaching here, and he kind of really inspired me to keep going. And one thing led to another. I picked up a small couple of roles, and I was on a small little stage play, and I met a wonderful woman, Susie Catliff, who said to me, "I think you should go to drama school. You'd get a lot from it." So I thought by that point, I've been doing stuff already in the real world. Do I want to go? I've heard good things about it, bad things about it. So in the end, I did audition. I went to a place called Drama Centre, had a great time. Lots of great alumni that have come out of there, from Tom Hardy, Michael Fassbender, all these great actors. And that was a good bit of time just to explore a little bit more myself, vocally, physically. You get to work on a lot of the classics. We spent some time in Greece doing some, the ancient Greek work, some time in Moscow doing a lot of Chekhov work, and then doing obviously Shakespeare back in England. So it was great, exploring all those stories. And then later, my heart, like I told you earlier, was always to get back into the movies. And I think it was a good kind of training. And I still love the stage. I would definitely, perform on the stage again one day. But I was able to take all this, like all the great actors I admired. Denzel Washington talks about this. You got to spend time on the stage and get that training, and you come to screen and you can bring it to the characters, especially the ones I like to play anyway. And that being said, there's a very different, approach in terms of technique on screen. And a lot of actors come to the screen. They're very big in their emotion and gesture, and you learn a way to kind of harness that inner kind of fire that you have going on, and you have to kind of bring it down a little. But it's all in the eyes, really. But that being said, one of the best things I ever did was sit there with a good friend of mine and record ourselves. We take scenes from movies and we just throw the camera up and we'd record them just over at his apartment, and we'd watch them back and we'd give each other notes and say, "Why the hell are you doing this with your eyebrow? Why are you doing this with your mouth?" It was really quite critical, and I think you need a good friend to do that with, because you don't take it personally. You think, "Wow, I am doing that with my face," because you're not used to seeing your face in a close up like that. So a lot of that. And then I think you really learn just from doing. And I met Blake later on along my journey, and we started just making so much content together, just for the hell of it and for the fun of it. And we just had this passion to make stuff. And you really get to see yourself a lot on screen and in the edit room, and and you think, wow, okay, there's nothing like learning on the job. And fast forward to today, 10 or 11 feature films later, I'm still developing. I still look at myself and cringe sometimes at certain scenes and choices that I've made, and other things. I think, I'm quite proud of that. So it's one of those things. I think you're always learning, you're always growing. And I think, I'd encourage anyone to go for it, and don't worry so much about the feedback and the haters out there in the world. You know what the internet's like these days. Everybody's got something to say. Everyone's got an opinion, but you got to go and enjoy it, have fun, take the criticisms and move on.
and the criticisms, especially like you were talking about, with you and a friend and actually watching and being critical. I mean, that is a part of growth, and without that, people never move forward, I feel like. But yet, if you read some people, if one negative thing is said, it's like crushes them and they, just like give up sometimes. So
No,
maybe,
yeah, you're right. You're right. You need a good. That's why you need a good friend group, and you always need a good, like I'd say, training partner, a good friend or somebody to go at it with, so you can laugh at it, as well as because you are going to be bad when you start out. It's like anything you start out at, you're bad, and you learn things, and some are better than others, and you got to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you know, where,
all right,
you know.
all right, Willie, this is a good place for you to jump in here. What do you have to ask for Louis today?
Well, actually, I have a question about your name.
Oh,
Is there
okay.
any royalty in the bloodline? Your name for kings?
I'd love to say that there is, somewhere along the line, I'm sure there's some, yeah, it heralds back to a great English king or something. But no, yeah, I think it's an interesting one because do you think the Louis or the James when you're mentioning the names?
Both.
So, yeah, it's not too glamorous. My, so my grandfather's from Spain, my grandmother's from Italy, and the other side, they're from Ireland and England. So it's quite a mix. And so I think when they were trying to settle on some kind of name, it was quite tricky to please all the Mediterraneans and the Brits. So I think Louis kind of fell into the kind of middle of the triangle, if you like, in terms of, you know, the history that the name has and everything else. And yeah, it's a very popular
Interesting.
French name. Very popular French name, obviously. So,
Yes.
but yeah,
Interesting.
I like to think it's names. Sometimes there's always something behind a name, and I think, like I was talking to Kat about earlier, I think you you know you have to live your life as a kind of a hero in the movie that you'd like to watch. And I often think that with a name, it can help you to. And the reason I'm saying this is because my name is a little bit. It's crafted a little because my full name is Louis James Cardona. Not a lot of people know that. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so the James is actually my middle name, and I think for a long time this comes back to reflecting and growing. And I think it was an agent way back said to me, like, maybe you should drop the last name because people presume from the first name and your last name that you're either Spanish or Italian. They don't know how to place you or French, and so I kind
Uh,
of dropped the last name and went with Louis James, and it helped me to kind of almost separate myself from myself and be like, okay, Louis James is, like Tom Cruise. Like Tom Cruise's name is obviously his real name is like Thomas Cruise Mapother the Fourth or something. But it gives you this kind of vehicle where you say, okay, I'm Louis James, and I often talk about that in the third person, and that way you don't get hit so hard with the criticism because you're like, well, it's not really me. It's somebody a persona that I've created to take on this business and what I want to achieve. So the question, I'm sorry, maybe I'm going really deep with this name question, but yeah, that's how I see it. So there's a kingly name there, King James we had over here and everything else, and
mm-hmm.
Scotland.
King
So
Louis. Mm-hmm.
yeah, all the Louis and James. So yeah, thank you. I like that question. Now you've made me feel really egotistical about my name.
Okay, well, in Manor of Darkness, so this is very interesting to me, the premise, this idea of
Yes.
a time loop, and you're just a character that's confronting yourself again and again and again. So, from the actor perspective, like, what's it like playing a character that's repeating the same moments, but emotionally you're evolving or you're different, changed each time? How did you prepare for that?
Oh, well, it's wonderful because often you only get one shot at one scene or one circumstance, but here I get to do it several times, and I can always blame any bad acting just on, oh, that was just a different choice in that moment for that Luke. But no, it is. You have to stay true to the circumstances if they're fresh every time, and you try and find things that are new because yeah, it can get repetitive, and you can end up falling into the same delivery or whatever. And but then at the same time, you've got to give a certain amount of that so the audience know what's going on. Oh, it's this part of the loop again, and my sister in the film, Laura, played by Kim Spearman, she, is realizing it's the loop. So you don't want to spoon feed anything to her, too easily, because the audience are experiencing what she's experiencing. Like, damn, it's a loop again. Like, what's he going to say? What's Sarah's character going to say, and all this. So it's pretty tricky and a headache for, I think, Blake. When he was writing and directing, and Lucas has been very supportive, even in the edit room. Because certain things were working, not working. We did a couple of reshoots, and we've ended up with the movie we have today. So I think once again, it comes back to that thing of just moving forward, making bold choices, and that you can always, cut them out in the edit room. And I think a lot of actors are scared to do that. And they think, wow, what am I going to do? How's it going to be different? And, just try something. We're all there to make a great movie. We're all trying to make the best movie. There shouldn't be any judgment. So, and luckily for me, I was producing as well. And I worked with Blake a lot and the other actors before as well. So it's a comfortable environment, which means you can, be bolder with your choices and kind of laugh off the bad ones.
Was there a moment in your life, like, did you think about, like, if I could be in a time loop, this would be the day or the moment that I would like to keep going back to, like, evolving each time?
Wow. So obviously there are times in my life, there are people that I would have, that I loved in my family that I've lost or didn't get to spend enough time with. I wish I could have gone back to those moments, and relived them and seen things differently. I think that's what I would definitely do. But otherwise, I think that's what, if I could travel back into a loop, that's what it would be, to see family that I loved and that I've lost. But I think for myself, maybe not, because, life is about the fact that we can't rewind is what makes us, you know, it transforms us, helps us to grow and become wiser. And I think if you could relive things over and over and over again, you would in some way iron out the human experience. So I think like we said earlier, you only learn from the mistakes. And often I look back at a lot of the mistakes I've made personally, and I think, wow, in the moment, I thought that was so bad. But looking back, it's kind of like a fond memory, because it led to this or it led to that. And yeah, so I hope that answers the question. I'd go back to see people that I can't see anymore.
Yeah, because I guess in a way too, like when you go back and you see them, then you also have to lose them again. So,
Exactly.
I guess everything's just the way it's supposed to be. And as you said, we don't get to go back. But I find that interesting every time that I hear of something that allows that. I wonder, like, what's the actor thinking about it? So the movie is like revolving on claustrophobia, really, I guess, of the manor. What was it like, the atmosphere? Like, did you feel claustrophobic, before you were just like the presence of being on the set? Did it feel that way?
Ah, well, it's a beautiful manor house, and a lot what the cast and crew was staying there, so it was a big family kind of feeling. But of course, like every huge manor house, I'm not sure if you've ever been to England or been to one of these country manor houses. They at night time and when it's quiet, they do have this eerie feeling like someone is there or something has happened there. And lots of them, of course, there are lots of tales and folklore about all these manor houses. And we discovered there was, for real, in that manor house, this huge basement underneath, which is in the movie, and this huge loft, which was just like a little creepy up there. And, we'd be laughing and joking with each other and stuff. But if you lost somebody just for like 30 seconds down the corridor, you definitely felt something. And, there were lots of rooms and corners there we still didn't kind of discover, so there's definitely history. You can just feel it, you can feel it in those buildings and on the grounds. And so that definitely played into it a little. And obviously a lot of cameras, a lot of lights. But yeah, if you're on your own somewhere in that building, you sense there's a lot of history there, a lot of souls, looming around.
Well, there's so much that we could talk about, like with this film, with your writing, with all of the things. But Willie, I want to give you, we're running out of our time, as we always do. There's just never enough to get the whole story. That's why we have people come back.
You're really fascinating. I mean, I could sit and listen to you just all day, if you had the time. I just, you're just a very interesting and entertaining person, and I've really enjoyed this interview. And like Kat, I wish we had more time.
Oh,
Well,
look, I'm loving this too. And look, I've got lots of other movies coming out in the future. I'd love to come back anytime and talk about them and other things. So please don't hesitate to reach out again.
all right, Willie, don't let him off that easy. Ask him one more question to send him away.
Yeah, go for it. Please do.
Okay. Well, you were talking about all the stories and stuff about, houses in England and stuff. Do you yourself believe in ghosts and haunted houses and stuff like that?
Yeah, do you know I do. I do. I mean, I'm I'm a pretty religious guy, and I've always been fascinated with it since I was a boy. What's happening in between life and death, and yeah, what spirits are out there working in the world. I think there are evil spirits out there working, and there are angels out there, and all that kind of thing. And that's why I spend a lot of my spare time researching and reading and watching. I can go down a rabbit hole, on YouTube watching these documentaries, but I think we will maybe get that as something happens to us in our lives or as we get older. And I don't know. I do believe there are things that are working that we can't see and that are moving us in some ways. And I think that, a lot of the creative people in the arts and stuff in some ways get closer to it through the work they do. But I think that's the sad thing about technology today, right? It can distract people from having time alone and just listening, and when you just listen in the silence in these beautiful old buildings, houses, or even out in the forests and the fields, and you definitely sense there's a presence of souls that have come and gone, or even souls that are floating around at the moment. So yeah, I hope that answers my crazy outlook on things.
It's all right. I believe in guardian angels.
There we go.
I was curious. That just reminded me of like when you mentioned technology, what your thoughts are on AI and how that's affecting creativity.
I think it's really helping, lots of friends and myself in the indie film world, where we can compete with these bigger stories and bigger budgets. You think, oh, we can't make that story because our ghost's just going to look crap. Well, now you can say, we can tell that story because we can use some of the tech to create a ghost that looks pretty decent, or some effects. And I think when it's used in that way, when it's used as a slave and not a master, I think it's a
Yeah.
good thing. But a lot of people end up, I've seen some stuff and it looks too much. It's too crazy. But hey, there's a market for everything. But I think if it's used in the right way, it can help any creative to get their voice heard in a world that's usually been dominated by very wealthy gatekeepers.
Go beyond somebody running around with a white sheet on their head.
Yeah, those days are long gone now.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great, great fun interview, and
Yes, it has.
we wish you the best of luck and with the
Yes. Good
movie,
luck.
and we look forward to seeing it here in the US, and we look forward to having you back again.
I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Hopefully
Thank you.
we can have you back.
Thank you for the time. It's been lovely chatting to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.